Tobias is ready to go here, so we will get him set up. Jumping the gun.
Yeah.
It's all right. It's all right. I like the eagerness. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
You got a nice background. Where are you now in the world? This is like where
Yeah,
in
I'm
the
still
world
in Mittweida, Germany as yesterday.
All right. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna hand it over to Tobias and Nepo here, University of Agder, and you got somebody sharing the screen. Looks like we're ready to go. Take it away, gentlemen.
Yeah, wonderful. Welcome everybody, and great that you are here, and great that you are still with us after 30 something hours. And yeah, we will talk a little bit about the Olympic Esports Games. Who is we? It's Nepomuk Nothelfer and me. And gladly, I can say that both from the University of Agder. As in terms of sports, he was on the market. We had to take him off the market as quickly as possible. So that's where we are really happy about that. But yeah, we are talking today about Olympic Esports Games, and we have this long title, Never Put a Lawyer and a Business Administration Scholar Together. We will come up with long titles and long sentences. But yeah, from centralization to adaptive pathways, rethinking governance for the Olympic Esports Games. And yeah, the fun part about that, we had to rethink everything after the Olympic Esports Games did some stuff, but we will talk about that later on. And yeah, as always, when we are starting something on esports, a definition is always important, especially Nepo did the wonderful chapter on the definition with Zeph and Nico, and I think that's it. Um, but yeah, that is something where for us, esports is competitive gaming. And Nipo, do you want to say something?
I mean, finish the slide, and then maybe no. Regarding the esports definition, I mean, there are multiples out there, right? But those are the core elements you and I have worked on for quite some time, and of course, Routledge Handbook of Esports, as you said, with Seth and Nico. Talking about the topic we want to talk about today. So you and I, we've been traveling the world, and there was this moment where we talked about, well, how actually to get something like this going. Great idea to have esports in the Olympics in general, at least in our opinion, but it has to be done right. That's what a lot of people talk about. But what does right mean? So when it comes to us, we identified a lot of challenges, and this is where we went down into the rabbit hole. Before we talk about those challenges and potential ways to find a solution, we of course want to get everyone up to speed watching us. So back then now meaning end of 2024, so about a year ago, the IOC finally announced the Olympic Esports Games in partnership, of course, with the Saudi NOC and the Esports World Cup Foundation, EWCF. And from that moment on, there were a lot of talks, and sometimes experts were involved as well. So things seemed, on the right track, even though it was clear that 2025 was never going to happen. This, of course, was then announced in February. Now the new timeline said 2027. I'm still not 100% sure, even without the newest information that came out a few weeks ago, they're gonna be able to deliver in 2027. Now I feel like there's a higher chance of that being postponed again, maybe to 2028, 2029 perhaps, because as most of you, probably all of you, read over the last weeks, IOC and Saudi split up, ended their cooperation, so everyone pursues now their separate ambitions. The Olympic Esports Games on the one hand, and the Esports Nations Cup on the other hand. And well, I mean, the whole idea about the Olympic Esports Games opened up so many doors when it comes to partnerships and regulatory processes all around the globe. So this is a great thing already, but at the same time now everyone's a bit scared, right? So is this the end of it? And Tobias and I am quite sure that this won't be the end of it. The Olympic Esports Games might not look like what we expected over the last months, but it surely is not the end of it. So the question we want to talk about today is still relevant. Now, what are these core tensions before, because I'm great, I'm the J.J. Abrams of our combi, right? I'm great at kicking the things off, but the real work, of course, has to be done by Tobias. So what are the core tensions with the models? Well, in esports, you have the publishers that control the IP. Each and every esports title is in total control, competition law being the only, real limits to that of the publisher. In traditional sports, that's not a thing. We can, of course, create a whole ecosystem when it comes to football/soccer. FIFA can't do anything against it in general because they don't have the IP regarding football. So this is why the publisher holds the control of the formats, the calendars, what sponsors you can work with, everything. In traditional sports, this is all Olympic governance. And there are, of course, differences, right? In esports, depending on which esports title we're talking about, in esports, you want everything to be fast-paced. It should be live. You need platform-native engagement. And on the other hand, you have the standardized Olympic system, right? If you follow League of Legends, basically each and every year, they change their competitive calendars, their system, how to qualify for what, everything. In traditional sports, this is quite rare, especially when it comes to the Olympics. And of course, this is also what the audience or the audiences of both of these areas have grown accustomed to, right? You have this interactive, creator-driven space, different kind of types of jokes during the broadcast in the esports sector, and then this really linear coverage, all of these rituals with the the Olympic flame, everything out there. So you see, there are already tensions on the most basic level, and on top of that, you have, of course, national differences when it comes to esports, because there are countries out there with vast experience in esports, with maybe working federations, even though federations do not hold the IP. But in France, for example, Ubisoft being part of the esports federation. And then you have different countries that don't really have an esports ecosystem at all. So it is really hard to just, invent a system where the IOC can just be like, well, okay, every one of our NOCs, National Olympic Committees, has to follow procedure A because, well, some of them might just not be able to. So this is where our research question arose, and with that, I give back to Tobias.
Yeah, that's the interesting part to looking at. I mean, you already realize there is tension that is hardly to overcome, and that's where we are thinking about how can we or how should a global Olympic framework preserve those standards that we are seeing in this Olympic environment, but also in this, let's say, traditional esports environment. How to make that happen, how to make those standards. We heard about the Lex Olympica from Leonid today. Stuff like that is important to the Olympia, but there is also something where you also see how can you do this flexibility in there, where context, where implementation, because we still have to think about the idea of integrating esports that changes completely. If I think about League of Legends, Fearless Draft is only a year old, and already people are saying, let's get rid of that because it's boring. Not my opinion, but our opinion. And that is something where we want to look at that. And that's why we are using multi-level governance analysis, where we have the international level, we have the national level, and we have the local authority, because at the very end, even if National Olympic Committee in the US is saying, let's do it that way, who is making it happen? And that is something where a local community or group is doing that. And also the idea of the actor mapping of the stakeholders. Who is actually involved? And you see now where the Saudis might be gone officially, but might be unofficially involved. They will be somewhat still the idea where we have to look how are the relationships and what are the interests and conflicts. And there it becomes really interesting where you see, a for-profit model in esports versus a non-for-profit model in the Olympics. So suddenly all of that becomes quite relevant. And there we looked at the public documents, organizational announcements, and we are also quite informed by informal discussions where we might not say who told us, but there is a lot of chatter happening. And yeah, then the next slide, please. And yeah, that's the multi-level governance landscape. You have the Formula Authority, you have the IOC. They are the bosses. They lead it. That's their thing. That's their Olympia. And that is something we always have to keep in mind. And that is something where it's their Olympia. They create it, they design it. And we have to look as a publisher in that context to adapt to that. How is the branding and all? But still, the publisher is developing it. Sure, we see here and there federations creating their own games, but they are white labeled by some publisher creating that. And topics like when should the Olympic Esports Games happen? I think the idea was somewhere in October, November, will absolutely collide with League of Legends. But also what Nepo was already saying, some NOCs have an esports body, but there are also a lot of others that don't have anything or don't even have an idea how to do it. And that is something as well. You have to deal with local organizers and tournament operators that are critical for the execution, for the community outreach, and to make it actually happen. So you have to get external support to make it happen. And yeah, back to Nepo.
Yeah, perfect so much. Thank you so much. Key actors and roles. So how we approached the whole situation was, okay, we need to map everything. Every actor needs to be on the table because, again, as we already said multiple times, there's no just one easy system that will work. We need to identify where are the strengths of some of these key actors, where are their weaknesses, and all of that, of course, needs to consider that it is an IOC tournament, while you need to get publishers on board. What you typically see, for example, is that publishers do not like working with esports federations. Why would they share, at least with all of them, right, some sort of power they hold, if they not really getting anything in return and they don't know the stakeholders? There's well, varying quality to esports federations, as we all know. Then at the same time, we might talk about shooters a lot, because shooters, of course, are a basic part of the esports history and future. But, well, it is an IOC tournament, so we have to accept that some of the esports titles would love to see in an Olympic Esports Games might just not be able to be part of it. So there are all these different interests. So we needed to, map it out. So we have the organizing entity, specifically now the IOC. So it is their tournament. Everyone needs to understand it. Also the publishers. If the publishers say, well, to have my game or my games in the Olympic Esports Games means I have some advantages, some disadvantages, there's some pros and cons, well, I have to accept that maybe as a Riot Games, it just doesn't make sense to have Valorant, which is typically, the title you want to market in countries that aren't too esports savvy as of right now. In Africa, for example. You have to accept that the IOC might be a great pathway into these countries, but they might not like Valorant. So maybe it's going to be the new boxing game that's perfect, right? But it is an IOC tournament. Then when it comes to NOCs, people need to understand that the National Olympic Committees are not part of the IOC system. The IOC is not what everyone is talking about in traditional sports. It's not a democracy in the widest term of all of these players involved. Of course, there are a lot of connections, but it's not like the NOC can vote for something. So that means that the NOCs might have a problem with a situation like, well, wait, we shall send all of these players. We have the lion's share of the work here, and at the same time, we're not getting a cent out of it. Is this something that can work out? Not really. So you need to find a connection on the sports level first before you can even think about the publisher and esports level, which is crazy because a publisher typically for us is the starting point with everything. So then you have the publisher, we already talked about them with their IP, and some of them, because they have vastly different philosophies when it comes to the esports titles, you need to get them on board. There's some publishers, they don't really care about the esports portion of the game. It's free marketing, amazing here. IOC, take my title, easy. Then there might be those that are more involved, but at the same time keen to get in there. But to be fair, the big ones, your Riot games out there, as Toby already mentioned, I mean, there might just be a calendar problem. And why should you give your IP away? Or why should you stress out your players that already have so much training and competition, right? Why should you force them into Olympic Games? And then we have the National Esports Associations, not holding the IP, varying quality, we already talked about that. But to be fair, a lot of those players are used to talking and working mainly with federations. For example, politicians in various countries being very important when it comes to the Olympics, and the IOC mostly used to working with other federations. So it might just be a fit. And then you, of course, have the surrounding partners supporting the platforms, broadcast, ... So you see, we only have 5 minutes to go. So we want to get to some solutions. But what I want to show you is we put it all out there on like, tabula rasa kind of thing. We identified the actors and we identified the frictions. I already talked about those, so we can basically skip this slide. And now you have chaos. A chaos where in a great world, everyone would be sitting at one table, but hey, that's a hell of a big table, right? Every publisher is different. Every NOC might want to have different things. And then you have to cater to, who are your fans, and you have to cater to those as well. So we need to create some sort of moving system. And for that, I give back to Tobias.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is something where we only showcase a little bit about that, where you have the NOC-led delivery with the structure, you have a joint national committee, and the publisher-led competition. So the idea is we have a global baseline with brand eligibility safeguarding. And when we go on the next slide, there is the idea that we are seeing a little bit. It's really rough because at the moment, I mean, with the changes, we have to deal with it. But where you have the National Olympic Committee has the mandate and is doing it. So they are using esports specialists. They are partnering up with national esports bodies. So you have a strong compliance, you have sports synergies and an Olympic integration, but slower iteration, a potential misfit with the publishers. And also weaker community trust if the esports voice is utilized. But yeah, still the idea of co-designed rule books and some creator-friendly broadcast guidelines. So there's a lot that is potential there if you go that pathway. And yeah, the next pathway is also the idea where you say, let's put them together. Bring the National Olympic Committee with the National Esports Associations and the publisher together in one room. Okay, already, I mean, per definition, those risks are complex decision making. bring them in a room and they will talk. They will talk until the end of time. And that is something where there are a lot of unclear accountability as well, coordination costs, but still in the end, a balanced authority. So if the publisher is saying, let's do it that way, the National Esports Association saying, yeah, that sounds good, and the NOC as well, that would be perfect. And you have legitimacy with the esports stakeholders by having those on board. And yeah, you have also a lot of enablers where the chance of open data sharing and transparent selection. And yeah, the pathway C, publisher-led. And the Olympic sanctioned it, where we say, okay, publisher, you do it. And normally with the tournament organizer and all of that, and the OEG provides the sanction. Strong competitive product. If you give it to Epic or Riot, there will be something cool out of it. But yeah, uneven national inclusion. Riot doesn't really have a server in the sub-Saharan Africa. And yeah, there is something where we need a compliance pack, we need localization quotas, we need some frameworks. And yeah, then following the next slide, that's the update.
Yeah.
That's probably the most important one.
Yeah, I know we have probably 2 minutes left, but I already seen all of your questions. Thank you so much. So we're going to get into them in a second. Just with the Saudi update, we already talked about it. What does this mean? So in our opinion, it's mainly opportunity, right? It's not like there aren't any, you could say, finances waiting to back up the Olympic Esports games. China, of course, being a big one, but China not being the only one. What does it mean? Well, it means, first of all, that the IOC had a vision and the Saudis had a vision. At the end of the day, they weren't able to bring those visions together, even though we know, of course, they tried to. So with this, the big question is, well, what were the differences? And this is something they can do now. This is an opportunity. What does the IOC really want? Because everyone here knows, of course, that the first Olympic Esports Games have to stick the landing. They need to be good. Do they need to be perfect? No, but this is about 25 years of traditional sports being a roadblock for esports, and now wanting to get in there and creating something for each and everyone. Well, this needs to be good. The problem is, or what we are afraid of, with all these opportunities, getting back to how should the system be created, which is amazing because all of the NOCs, and I can promise you that, no one has a clear idea where it was heading in details. And well, the details matter because the NOCs need to do all the work. The NOCs need to think about, well, should we be active in Counter-Strike? If we assume that Counter-Strike 2 would be one of the games, the non-virtual sports simulation games the IOC approves, just pretending. But some of the federations might be, no, we don't want this as an NOC. But there might be a shooting federation that's like, yes, we want it actually. So all this chaos, now they have more time to structure it. The risk, of course, is all the uncertainty, destroying everything they created over the last months in that wave. A lot of us also write in order to get not just research projects, but any project ahead. So
Nepo, I'm gonna cut you there so we can have time for Q&A.
No worries.
Can either of you see the Zoom chat? If you can read the question and then try to give your response. We got about 4 minutes. Perfect.
We're gonna do. I copied some out, but I just stick with yours. I agree. It's not about having it in the Olympics for the sake of the Olympics. Do we need both? Is it even a fit? So with this question, I would maybe start. I think it is a fit if everyone understands and it's communicated well who the target audience really is. The IOC has, of course, this idea of bringing people from the esports space in, but there are multiple layers to this. One would be, if we create a tournament like this, can we learn on a digital stage, what does this mean to create a whole new product? Also, everything's gonna be growing together, right? In 15 years, you might not have sports and esports like this. What we might have are more and more hybrids with virtual reality. So they're probably the IOC or the traditional sports ecosystem wants to be active as well. But there will always be publishers. There will always be rights holders where the IOC cannot just do whatever they want to do. But of course, there would be a possibility for them to be publishers themselves. So, and also, and this is probably the main point, they want to create something for the sports ecosystem in the esports world. So to answer your question, if we understand what they're trying to do and they actually act on it and communicate it well, I don't think there's any problem, because there's always going to be something for the Counter-Strike fans and there's always going to be something for the virtual sports fans. Question 2, I will read it, and Tobias, feel free to answer it. Don't the NOC globally need to follow the strategic framework of what the IOC proposes?
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, technically, yes, but it's always a part where, sure, there is a strategic framework where a lot of freedom is in there, and they still can say no and vote the leading guy away in that sense. And yeah, and that is something where you see that, and that links also to the next question, where would it make sense to first build identify or analyze functioning national frameworks and then use them as models or building blocks to develop a global Olympic framework that balance standards with context-specific flexibility. Yeah, I mean, that's the ideal way, where you say you are building something bottom-up, grassroots, where you say, because we see it already, there is, if you look at France, how they do esports, you need to go just next to it to Britain, completely different approach. Go to Germany, different approach. And that is something where it's quite interesting to see. But yeah, before the last question, I just because that I give to Nepo, because one quote is always the part that always reminds me from Sam Matthews from Fnatic. Sadly, the quote disappeared, where esports doesn't need the Olympics need esports.
Wonderful quote, hard to follow up on this. The last question is, why were the Olympic Esports Games in Saudi Arabia canceled? So to be fair, this is something I don't think we're 100% qualified to talk about, because there are multiple reasons. Some we can assume, some we know, others we have no idea about. What are the issues? I feel like the issues, or the main thing that's important, specifically if we keep the question in mind, how can we now proceed, right, is that when it comes to the esports titles, the IOC has a clear, different idea. They cannot go all out just for the sake of it and do what most of us maybe envisioned. And then, of course, in the details, there's a ton of partners and questions how to work with. So typically, the Saudis, they're not too happy if it, costs another 6 years to make it great. They want them to be in 2027 or even earlier, as we see with the Esports Nations Cup. But, well, probably wasn't going to happen with the Esports Nations Cup for 2026. You see, they have a plan for a sooner integration. So this is mainly the thing we feel like this went south.
All
so
right,
I can see
we're gonna have to cut.
Beautiful
we're gonna
face.
have to cut you off here.
Oh, we were already finished. So
yeah.
oh, good.
We shouldn't have asked that question to a lawyer. We got a lawyer response. But
100%.
Thank you so much, Nepo and Tobias. Will be really interesting to see what transpires in the space coming up with definitely the fluctuations that are occurring. Whoever is sharing your screen, if you can stop sharing, and we will get set up for Jennifer Zimmerly from Rockhurst University, examining the role of high school esports in student academic performance and attendance. Everybody, continue to engage in the Twitch chat. For Toby and Nepo, there's several other questions. If you can take a few moments and respond to those questions in the chat, that'd be great. So thanks so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Have a great conference.